This Saturday, we're going to see if the Miami Hurricanes can stay consistently dominant for a fourth straight week. All the attention to detail that comes with that. And for the Florida Gators, we're going to see if they're still playing for their head coach.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and host of Postgame on the Hurricanes Radio Network. And thank you to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. On this loaded episode, we're going to be talking with the recruiting overlord in just a second, who's also the host of Locked On Seminoles. Miami and Florida State, are they going to be on a collision course to possibly face one another twice this season, or is Georgia Tech going to end up spoiling one of these two teams' plans at the end of the year? We'll talk about Billy Napier's future, which is already very much up in the air, and if Miami pulls off the win, there could be an argument for Napier not making it through the weekend with Florida. We'll talk keys, Miami versus the Florida Gators. So let's bring on Brian Smith, the recruiting overlord, host of The Portal, which is an awesome show on the Locked On Network, also host of Locked On Seminoles. All right, so Brian, explain to the folks out there why, with Florida heading into their fourth game now, with their head coach on the hot seat, why this is an important benchmark as to, hey, if the coach may not make it out of the weekend.
Yeah, if you're a player that has no more eligibility after this year and you're trying to get into the NFL draft, do you want to be attached to this? Because if they get hammered, and I think most realistic people expect Miami to hammer them, do you want to be a part of a lame duck coach? You need to know for sure. So there's the 4-game rule. If you play in 4 or fewer, you can redshirt. Next week, and this is just the way it works in football, this isn't a UF thing, they have a bye. Most teams fire their coach during a bye if possible. The other bye, ironically, is the one before Georgia. Talking to a few people, including Zach Goodall, you and I both worked with him covering Miami a while back. He covers UF. You know, like we were talking about it, and I didn't think about it then, but like maybe they wait till Georgia. That's what they want, hoping guys don't do that. But I bet a lot of kids and their parents are like, look, we know now or we're out. And they got to be real careful about the locker room. Yeah. So how this game goes, you're going to know by mid-third quarter. Because, again, I think Miami will hammer because I don't think all the Florida kids are bought in now. Did you watch the Florida versus LSU game? Holy moly. So I would imagine there's going to be some kids that make decisions on this. It could be to Miami's benefit. I mean, this could get really ugly if I'm right. If Florida doesn't have a good first quarter, how many of those kids are bought in? Because some of them are going like, well, I wonder where I'm transferring to before halftime hits, literally.
And all right, so what does Florida have to do? And listen, I've got my opinions on this because I watched their entire game against South Florida. I watched a good bit of the LSU game, and it's a team that they definitely have more talent than what they're actually showing with these results, but consistent self-inflicted wounds. DJ Lagway does not look like he's developing the way that people expected based on the season he had last year. He's taken a big step back. Their defense has looked good, though, although they're going to be without a pretty important member of that defensive line for the foreseeable future. So, I mean, is it possible Florida in a rivalry game plays their best game of the year, puts it all together, and really gives Miami a run?
I think in the first quarter, you might see sections of that. And to be honest, their defense didn't play horrible against LSU.
No,
it really didn't. Obviously, you've covered this already, but Caleb Banks not being in is not going to help their cause on defense, by the way. He's one of the rare big nose guards that can two-gap. That's going to hurt them. But, like, they need some kind of juice on offense, Alex. Watching and again, I cover Florida State. I've never been a Florida fan, etc. But Florida should always have it's Florida. DJ Lagway had 5 interceptions. That is beyond coaching malpractice. For the love of mankind, they should surely play at least a little bit better. Miami's defense isn't ultra difficult to understand. They're playing too high and they're coming after you. They just got to make plays. They got to block better. They got to run back, like everything. They got NFL players, but if they get through like the 8-10 minute mark of the first quarter and they've had lackluster effort, especially on offense, Oh boy. I could see that falling off a cliff. And like I was talking about it on Locked On Seminoles earlier today. Like, look, man, Carson Beck is darn near 80%. You give him an inch, he takes a foot. You know what I mean? He's going to kill you. They have to start faster. This game will get out of hand very quickly.
Yeah, and so far 3 games in for Miami. What I look to as a key heading into this game against Florida is keep doing what you're doing. I mean, it's not been completely perfect. They committed too many penalties against South Florida. You want to clean that up a little bit. It was 9 penalties for 65 yards. You've had a couple of coverage breakdowns this year when quarterbacks have extended plays, but the offense has been virtually perfect so far. You talked about Carson Beck, who he fits Shannon Dawson's offense like a glove, and there's a lot of extra motivation with Beck because he heard everything that was said about him in Athens and around the country when he left Georgia, and he's used that as a positive motivational tool to this point. And Miami's been dominant, Brian, at both lines of scrimmage as you kind of hoped, and we're seeing it so far. So, I mean, I think for Miami, it's like you don't necessarily really need to improve anything. You just need to keep doing what you're doing. And my next test for them, because obviously, and I think this is a better overall team than they were a year ago, a lot more balanced, a lot better defense. But last year they started 9-0, had a couple close calls in that 9-0 start, and then they faded down the stretch. So what I'm going to be looking for now, these next 2 games, I mean, Florida bye week and then Florida State, which we're going to talk about. Like, I need to see that intensity not waver whatsoever. I need to see Miami show that they can keep doing what they're doing over the course of a 12-game regular season, and then who knows what comes after that.
That's the exact same thing that I talked about on Locked On Seminoles when they played East Texas A&M, which I'd never even heard of. I'm like, man, they're going to lay an egg in this game in terms of effort. This is going to be awful to cover. They scored on like their first 8 drives.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable how focused they were. Like, I say this all the time on every show I go on. I'm not going to change it here. The players, all the way through practice and on game day, their effort usually resembles the helmet of the other team, meaning like when Miami plays Florida State, you're going to get Miami's best shot. It's Florida State. But do they play that way against Bethune all the way through? Usually not. Florida State did it. Miami kind of showed that, like they've changed. They went up another notch from what I've seen. I mean, if you've got a different take, please share it. But like their effort is different this year.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's from. I have no idea. But when Miami has this much effort, they're capable of beating any team on their schedule.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's and so like to me so far, Miami, they're number 4 now, but they look like one of the best 2 or 3 teams in the country. Absolutely. Based on what we've seen so far. It's about sustaining that. Before we move on to some Miami versus Florida State chatter, do you have a prediction? I mean, I know you mentioned it could get ugly, but do you think it will get ugly? What's your prediction for Miami hosting Florida on Saturday?
Canes 38, Gators 17. I picked Florida to win this game preseason because I figured they'd eventually win one big game. I don't know if they're going to beat bottom end SEC teams. Like, how many more games is Florida going to win this year? Is this team going to win 4 games?
I mean, so I guess some people are now wondering maybe out of a bye week they can shock Texas if Arch keeps struggling the way he struggled.
Texas's defense is lights out against Florida's offense.
Yeah.
Oh God. Right. Well, UF had 220 yards of offense. Like Arch has got problems, but their defense is lights out. They're not beating Texas.
All right, so I want to take a look with Brian on the other side. We'll have him take his portal hat on and put on his Locked On Seminoles hat. And I think it's okay for us to talk about this. I know Mario Cristobal would never advocate looking ahead, but keep in mind, whatever happens, Miami versus Florida, I think Miami will win the game. But even if they don't, you still have your entire ACC schedule in front of you. Could we possibly see 2 matchups this year between Miami and Florida State, who have looked like the 2 best teams in the ACC so far? Maybe Georgia Tech might have something to say about that. But you want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Guys, this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right actually means cashing in. With football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. Guys, I've been playing Prize Picks since 2021. It's so easy. You make your selections more or less. When it comes to the Miami Dolphins, I've been going with less, and I've been cashing in pretty big. And the best part, even if one of your picks misses, Prize Picks invented the flex play, so you can still double your money. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code Locked On College to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code Locked On College for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. We are also proudly brought to you by Game Time. A lot of people have asked me, best spot to buy tickets for Florida Gators at Miami Hurricanes. There is no better place to buy them than the Game Time app. And I'm looking right now, Game Time, tickets starting at $178, a great deal. And that's for upper level, which is still a good view in that stadium. You can get club level tickets right now for $349. And the prices are probably going to keep getting better the closer we get to Saturday at 7:30 p.m. Folks, I use Game Time because the app gives the advantage back to the fans. On some of these other ticket services, they slap on the hidden fees, the prices jump at checkout. You get none of that with Game Time. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code Locked On College for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen. For your next listen, make sure you check out The Portal. Brian Smith does an awesome job on that show, talking all things NIL, transfer portal. I mean, he brought up that great nugget, the great point that, hey, this is Florida's 4th game. So guys are going to want to know, what's the status of my head coach? I can take the rest of the year off, red shirt transfer, whatever it is. You get nuggets like that on the portal, available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. All right. So Brian, the teams that have stood out most in the ACC so far, Miami, Florida State, who they were off this past weekend, but they dominated Alabama week 1. Like you said, they did what you're supposed to do against an FCS opponent in East Texas A&M. Then they had their bye week. But Georgia Tech, I also need to give them credit. They just pulled off the home victory against Clemson. But are Miami and Florida State, are they the best teams in the conference right now? And how could Georgia Tech maybe spoil the party for one of them?
It's a really interesting take because, number one, neither one of us, because we had private and on-air conversations about Florida State. We're like, they'll go to a bowl, but that's about it this year. So they're shocking. But Georgia Tech is like punching people in the mouth. They ran over Clemson.
Yeah.
And even their defense, they don't recruit the kind of kids that FSU and Miami do on defense. Not even remotely. They have hit on the portal, kind of like Florida State did in 23. Like, they got a bunch of guys. I'm like, who is this? These guys have been at 2 and 3 schools. Their defense is solid. When you add in Haynes King, who's this year's version of Riley Leonard, he stays healthy. 10-2, I think, is their floor. I still think they'll lose to Georgia. I think they'll lose one ACC game, maybe. Their schedule, and I mean, this is brutal. Like, and I know it's not them picking it out, so they didn't spot check this with a 5th-year senior quarterback. But like, they got NC State, and they've got Duke. They're 2 good teams.
Yeah.
But who else do they play? Because they don't play the Noles. They don't play the Canes.
No.
The ACC is obviously not a great league. Who are they playing that they're going to lose to? Georgia game doesn't matter because it's not a conference game.
Right.
They play at Georgia or at Duke October 18th, and November 1st they play at NC State. Boston College.
And Duke doesn't look as good as and Duke, I don't think is as good as I thought they might be. And they just lost to Tulane, and then they're the butt of every joke because they paid all this money to take Dereon Mensa from Tulane, and then they lose to Tulane. So,
yeah, that's not a good look, by the way.
No,
but
no,
I mean, is it out of the question they could go into the Georgia game undefeated? No.
Yeah.
Nobody saw that coming. So if, let's say, Miami beats Florida State might have 1 loss in the league and not make it to the ACC title game.
And the flip side is also true. Florida State beats Miami, and
right. Yeah. Because Miami, they don't play Clemson, correct?
No, they don't.
Florida State still has to go to Clemson. So this game is more important to the Noles than it is to Canes. I know Clemson's not as good as normal, but playing in Death Valley is not friendly.
No.
You got to be, that's a 50-50 kind of deal. Maybe Cade Klubnik comes out of his funk. I don't know. But Miami's got the easier path, but Georgia Tech has the easiest. If Florida State loses this game, their chances of making the ACC title game are not that great, which is wild because they could still end up ranked in the top 5 to 7 and not make the ACC title game. That's just crazy.
Wow. I mean, so I can say from a Miami point of view, and I talk to Miami fans all day, every day. I know that obviously getting the win against Notre Dame to start the season, taking care of business since then, it's raised the expectations for a lot of Miami fans who are thinking, okay, we got to finally win the ACC, definitely be a playoff team. Like all of that has been solidified by Miami's start. Tell me the pulse of the Florida State fan and again, I know you're obviously always going to have a few fans that no matter how bad you were last year, they're like, we're going to go 13-0 again. We're going to get into the playoffs. But you had other people who were on the fence that may now be coming around to that idea. Like, what do you think now the Florida State fan pulse is on how far that program should go this year?
I think it actually changed during the East Texas A&M game for the same reason I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
They were so focused and they just came out and they didn't play with their food. They ate and they left. Okay. You know what I mean? They paid their tab and they were out of there. Yeah. That's the kind of attitude that Bowden's teams. Remember those teams where they played in Duke or away. It was 56-7 in the middle of the third quarter. You know what I mean? Like it was that.
Sure.
The attitude is back like that. So now everybody's like 10 wins is kind of like bare minimum. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I don't disagree. Even if they lose to Miami, Clemson's the only other team with remotely the same talent level and a coach. No offense to Florida. They got some more talent, but that last game in Gainesville, if Billy's out, that could be the worst loss in UF. Ooh. I mean, it could be worse than the Miami game last year because how many of those kids are going to be bought in? So their schedule sets up pretty well, minus the Clemson game gives me pause because I still don't know what's going to happen with them. They got NC State the week before UF, but they won't be looking past it now because NC State's better than UF, which is, by the way, that should never be the case. But but it is. So yeah, UF's the easiest job, even in the state of Florida. It's got the SEC moniker, and Billy screwed that up. But the bottom line, Florida State, I think, should be 10-2 or better with the win over Alabama, et cetera, and still might not make the ACC title game. That wasn't even on our radar preseason, like in any way, shape, or form.
Wow. So I think the moral of the story here is like for both Miami and Florida State, even we have a lot at stake in that game every year. Bragging rights. It is an ACC game, in-state rivalry, but the loser of that game might miss out on the ACC championship game because of how easy Georgia Tech's schedule is. So, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Miami obviously has Florida first. Real quick, Brian, before I let you run, how big is a game like this weekend in recruiting with Miami and Florida going after a lot of same kids? And then also if Miami does, maybe get Billy Napier fired, and a lot of the kids who are committed to him might be looking down to Coral Gables.
I think it's huge from an in-state perspective because, as you know, living in the state of Florida, these kids live in extremely small bubbles. Their perception of Florida is not going to be the same as Alex Donno or Brian Smith. It's still the Gators. It's still State U, blah, blah, blah. They want to see them good because they want to have them as an option that's a good option, that's local. Mom can go see it, blah, blah, blah. It's a good school. But if they get trounced, not only is UF going to lose out on a lot of kids in the class of 26 and lose some commitments, possibly to Miami, it's the 27 kids, 28 kids. Because I guarantee you, I haven't looked at the list, but I guarantee you Cristobal and his staff have a bevy of really good recruits for future classes. Miami gains a leg up. It's massive for them. I know UF is down. That's obvious. But if they beat the bejesus out of them and run it up on them, yeah, I think that would be a very beneficial thing to their roster long-term.
Well, we appreciate Brian's time as always. Make sure to follow him on X at FBScout_Florida. Check out his 2 shows on the network, The Portal and Locked On Seminoles. And Brian, I know we'll probably talk to you even during the bye week, but we'll definitely talk in a couple of weeks for an epic crossover episode. Speaking of crossovers, I'm going to have a crossover later this week with Brandon Olson from Locked On Gators. So yeah, we're going to run that one back from last year. I don't know if he's quite as confident as he was heading into last year's game. You want to keep it right here. We're only, we want to thank everyone for making us your first listen. Smash that like button, subscribe. We'll talk to you next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.